For decades now, movie studios and theaters have shared this, I want to call it an uneasy symbiotic relationship of sorts, because the movie theaters depend on the content created by the studios to attract the crowds and sell their overpriced pop and popcorn and M&Ms. That dependency, mind you, is now more clear than ever, a little more on that later. And the studios, on the other hand, rely on the distribution chain made up by theaters. Without theaters, you can't put your tentpole summer blockbuster that costs $200 million plus to make in front of as many people as possible. So they both depend on one another. As I mentioned earlier, it seems to me like the movie theaters are in a worse position from a bargaining standpoint, I mean, because over the summer when so many Hollywood productions shut down, that meant we didn't have movies to play in theaters, right? Like this has been, for movie lovers, this has been a very weird year. The local movie theaters here in Calgary have been, and I imagine it's the same thing in your city, they were playing old movies for like, I don't know, like $4 a piece, which is, I guess, nice if you want to see these classics that you love on the big screen with the best sound possible. But I mean, I didn't go, right? But I kind of wanted to. The local theater was playing The Matrix. I wanted to see that again in theaters, some, what, 21 years later. I'm old. And I remember when coronavirus, the COVID pandemic, I mean, it wasn't even a pandemic yet. Back in like, I don't know, like March, April, when lockdown started, like when it stopped being this abstract thing that we read about. It's something in China, it's so far away, it's just like something that you read about in the news. And I became part of our everyday reality. Movie theaters were among some of the first businesses to shut down, because movie theaters, I think the only other industry that was as impacted as the movie theater business, I think, is air travel, because their business model is very similar. They both revolve around packing as many people as possible in a confined space with recirculated air, where you just chill there with strangers for a couple of hours, right? So Corona Central, understandably so, they shut down. Now, businesses, including theaters, have since reopened, and now we're experiencing the so-called second, or in some places, third wave. It doesn't seem like it's a great idea to go back to movie theaters just yet. So here's the problem. Movie theaters really depend on the studios for the content. The studios, on the other hand, don't really depend on the movie theaters as much. Of course, if you have like an Avengers movie or something like that, that costs 250 million plus however much it costs to advertise these movies, which sometimes it's about the same that it costs to actually make the flicks. Those movies, yeah, they depend on the movie theater experience to get as many people as possible to break those crazy box office records and all those. They probably wouldn't put something like that out on video on demand. But the studios don't have to rely on just huge blockbusters, right? You have movies that are what you would think of like big blockbusters, like tentpole films that bring a lot of people to the movie theaters that didn't really need like a crazy box office record to be profitable. Movies like Deadpool 1 and 2, Joker also is a good example. Movies that weren't that expensive to make, and even if they came out on video on demand, they probably would have been very successful because they were so affordable. So what will probably happen is that movie theaters going forward will prioritize cheaper movies, movies that aren't so expensive, perhaps more unknown stars or inexperienced directors, something like that, which I guess ultimately would kind of be a good thing, because how many world-saving superhero team-up movies do we really need? At one point, like, the stakes are so high already. Like, the next Avengers movie, like, they saved the universe already. What's it gonna be next time? So in a way, that could be a good thing, obviously not for the movie theaters. And because of that, movie theaters have been raging against the dying light of what could be perhaps the death of their industry. When Universal put out Trolls World Tour on video on demand, AMC and I think Regal Theaters as well threatened to boycott future releases. And because Universal is sitting on a new Fast and Furious movie that will need theater distribution to make back the money they spent in the production, they probably didn't want to anger their movie theater partners so much, right? So it just broke, I think yesterday. Apparently, Universal reached a deal with AMC that will allow movies to come out on video on demand 17 days after the theatrical release if they make less than 50 million in the opening weekend. In a PR statement, Universal said that they're still committed to the movie theater experience and everything, which we know is a load of, right? They need the movie theaters, but they probably resent the fact that they need them. That's the reality, right? If they could distribute the movie themselves, they would. And I mean, they can. the only reason they don't is because the movie theaters, they feel like they still depend on them for these big blockbuster tentpole titles that are coming out. I think the writing is on the wall for Hollywood to end up shifting away from the big, loud blockbuster model and just scale things back a little bit, which would mean that they wouldn't need the movie theater so much, which will likely spell the end of the industry. And I don't say this with it, like, I'm not happy about this, don't get me wrong, I love going to the theater, but I have a feeling that going to the theater soon enough is gonna seem like a boomer thing to do. If we don't get a coronavirus vaccine within, like, I don't know, a year, and studios start putting these movies out on video on demand, like Universal did with Trolls World Tour, like Disney did with Mulan, I think what's going to end up happening is humans are amazing at adapting. We're very good at it. That's why we're all over this freaking planet. So I think what's gonna happen is, even for movie lovers like myself, you watch a movie on video on demand and you're thinking, I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to pay for parking. I can eat my own food. I can pause whenever I want. I can go to the bathroom and not miss on anything. If the audio is mixed to shit, right, Christopher Nolan, I can put on subtitles. Look, I love the movie going experience. I need to say this. Don't get me wrong. I do, because I know what the comments are going to say. But Izzy, going to movies is awesome. I agree with you 100%. But I think it's only going to take you doing that like twice, maybe 3 times, like renting a movie, like a big movie that's supposed to, that typically you would see in theaters. I think it's only going to take you doing that twice at home, on your couch, on your, like, most people have a decently sized TV nowadays, right? It's not like the 90s when like big screen TV was like a 29-incher. I remember I had that. Like that was a big screen back in like 1994. I have a 64-inch 4K TV in the living room now that I sit pretty close to. So I think we're gonna be okay getting our movies at home as opposed to going to a building and waiting in line and buying overpriced snacks. I feel bad for people who work in this industry. I get it. But I think if we don't get a vaccine really quick, I think movie theaters are going the way of the dodo. I don't know, man. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Follow me on social media. I'm very active on both Twitter and especially Instagram. And that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done.